DocTalk is brought to you by Merck Animal Health. At Merck Animal Health, we're shaping the future of animal health with pioneering science, connected technology, and insights-driven solutions to bring our customers an unparalleled portfolio of choices to improve cattle care and operational efficiency. We support you and your legacy by helping you meet the challenges of today with the innovations of tomorrow.
Hey folks, welcome to the show. We're going to talk about a great topic, dairy beef. It's something that is new in our beef industry, it's new in the dairy industry, and it's still feeding cattle. We're going to have a great guest today, Dr. James Koltes, who's right here at Iowa State University. He's in our animal breeding and genetics section. He's a key member in the industry that's helping work with the genetics in these dairy beef crosses. It's going to be a great show. Stay tuned.
When you spot BRD in your cattle, that's your golden opportunity to target infection and its associated fever with a single dose of Resflor Gold, the industry standard dual therapy. To learn more, talk to your Merck Animal Health rep or your vet and see label at resflorgold.com. Animals intended for human consumption must not be slaughtered within 38 days of treatment. This product is not approved for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older, including dry dairy cows.
Hey folks, welcome to DocTalk. I'm Dr. Dan Thompson here with my friend and colleague Dr. James Koltes, and we're at Iowa State University in the Department of Animal Science, where Dr. Koltes is an assistant professor and he is one of our leaders in our animal breeding and genetics section. And we have quite a history of animal breeding and genetics at Iowa State University.
Yeah, very long history, back to Jay Lush and folks working in all species, especially on the dairy side where I'm working today.
Yeah, when you think about EPDs and Wilhelm and Lush and all of the things that came out of your section, I'm glad you're carrying on the great tradition.
Appreciate it, Dan.
Yep. So with that, we're melding some EPDs. We're bringing the beef and the dairy industry together. And I guess the question that most people have is, you know, why are dairymen doing this dairy beef cross?
Sure. So dairy beef has kind of evolved over the years. I mean, historically, folks used to use beef because they thought it was a good calving ease option for their heifers. But as we got more into genetic improvement, that kind of went away. And then it came back again when the price of those dairy animals for beef went down. We're selecting those animals totally differently, right? We're going for milk production, for fertility, for functional traits related around dairy that are just quite a bit different than putting on the right kind of muscle for beef. So to increase that value, we've started breeding back to beef again selectively, and really genomics and sex semen have allowed us to do that.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about on the dairy side. Now that you got sex semen, you can make sure you get your heifers out of your top end of your cows?
Yeah, so you can essentially go through with genomics instead of it being like a coin flip or less. We've got good accuracy in picking those best genetic animals and can identify the ones we really want to breed to dairy, and then those lower end ones that maybe we don't want to keep the replacements from might make great candidates to breed to beef bulls.
Yeah, they're still making good milk. They're just not in the top third.
That's right. So we can let them, continue pay their bills for that cost. And that's another thing about, the dairy beef side is it costs a lot of money to raise a heifer, and it'll take you 2 or 3 lactations to pay off that animal and start making money. So if you need to bring profit faster, you can sell a beef cross calf that might be worth a bit more, and then you can take those genetics out on the lower end genetic animals so that you focus on really raising the best quality dairy animals moving forward for milk production in the dairy.
Yeah, and so it makes some interesting phone calls, because now we have dairymen that are trying to feed cattle, and we have cattle feeders that are trying to figure out how many of these are going to hit the market, and kind of what's this going to do to our beef market as far as having enough cattle to feed, or having too many cattle to feed, if it'll soften that feeding market. Just different things floating around in the industry on that.
Yeah, and I think dairy producers know how to do a lot of things well, but they often don't think about those beef calves because they're either something they're trying to sell out of the production system because they don't have the facilities, or they just haven't been thinking about how do we produce the highest quality beef. So there's that communication aspect there, I think, to link up with the folks on the beef side to produce a better product long term.
Yep, and you know, that not very often that they're wanting to get to 90% concentrate in a finished ration, and you know, feed a little more, a little higher quality hay than we do in the cattle feeding industry.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But folks, this is just a tremendous topic. We have one of the experts in the world here to talk about the dairy beef, and we're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to jump into some of your research, and we're going to talk about some of the crosses that he's been doing and things that he's learning about dairy beef, the dairy on beef, and beef on dairy crosses. You're watching Doc Talk. We'll be right back.
DNA Dialogue is brought to you by Aginity Feeder, powered by Neogen.
Well, when most people purchase calves, they have a target number of days in mind, and it's usually based on incoming weight and the type of class of cattle they purchase. But there are other ways to actually try and estimate optimum days on feed. And of course, our trend is to make cattle bigger and bigger. And really that's because cost of gain in general, in other words, the cost that you're putting into that animal per day, is generally less than the cost or price you're receiving on them cattle per pound. So really, technically speaking, from an economic term, we should feed until our marginal cost, the cost for that day, equals our marginal revenue, which is obviously the price per pound. The hard part in that is knowing cost of gain on a daily basis. And there's a lot of debate about that in the industry. Many industry experts feel like the cost of gain is going up pretty dramatically at the end of the feeding period, whereas I think the data today show that actually cost of gain's fairly level, and if anything, suggests we should be making cattle bigger and bigger, which is why the trend has been to make cattle bigger. The only other thing I'd mention that's really important if you're a feedlot operator is how are you marketing the cattle. So really there's three general methods. Live, so on a live weight basis, one price for all the cattle based on live weight. Carcass weight basis, sometimes called dress basis, or in the beef. That's again one price on a carcass weight, or a grid, which is obviously carcass weight, but also premium and discount for yield and quality grade. I bring that up because if you're a live cattle marketer and selling cattle on a live basis, cost of gains are probably going up more dramatically at the end than if you're a dressed basis or grid-based marketing program. So how you market cattle influences optimum days on feed, but really it's about knowing your cost of gain on a daily basis.
Are you a cattle feeder looking to manage for a stronger and more profitable set of cattle? Look no further than Aginity Feeder. Aginity Feeder utilizes DNA to gain insight into your cattle's genomic potential, with the information to predict performance, quality, and economic endpoints for cattle feeders. Animals are scored and ranked in a simple format, driving more precise and accurate management decisions. Aginity Feeder gives you the power to predict days on feed, manage variability within lots, characterize carcass performance, and focus on metrics important to you and your operation. With the data provided, you will identify superior animals earlier and maintain high operational efficiency. Maximize your profit and optimize performance with Aginity Feeder.
They're here, they're hungry, and they can't be stopped with ivermectin. Choose Safeguard when you deworm your cattle to take out resistant parasites like brown stomach worm, Cuperia, Nematodirus, and others. With Safeguard's efficacy, you can kill more resistant worms in your cattle, so you don't leave potential on the table. Consult your veterinarian for the diagnosis and treatment of parasitism. Then bite back at safeguardworks.com.
Welcome back to Doc Talk. I'm Dr. Dan Thompson, here with Dr. James Koltes. Dr. Koltes is an assistant professor here in the Department of Animal Science, where he is in the animal breeding and genetics section. And he works with dairy genetics and beef genetics, has been involved with some pretty unique studies down at McNay Ranch, where we looked at 25 years of single trait selection for quality grade, which turned out a lot of prime carcasses in those calves.
Yeah, and a few good AI bulls too.
Huge AI bulls. But now we're working at something a little bit different. You're taking that beef experience and your dairy experience and you're literally crossing them. So talk to me about what you're doing with some of your research.
Yeah, so there hasn't been a lot of research on the beef dairy cross side, especially in the U.S. There's been a little bit of work done in Europe, but the way that they look at meat quality and carcass quality is really different from the way that we do here. So not a lot of thought put so much on the marbling side or maybe on some of the aspects of muscularity, dairy versus a beef type carcass, for example. Our research has really worked on first trying to understand what's out there, characterizing the carcasses from different dairy by beef crosses, looking at strengths and weaknesses, because part of what we need to understand, there's so many options for breeds that you can cross these animals to. What's the best breed cross? And obviously that's going to differ for different producers and based on their different goals. And then moving forward, the other question is, well, can we better optimize our dairy animals in those crosses and use some of the genomic tools that we've used on the beef side alone or the dairy side alone and identify those beef bulls that are maybe better for a beef by dairy cross?
One thing that was interesting to me is that, we went Cavanese, little calf, littler calf, littler calf, and now they're learning that you don't want to go too small because then you wind up with a smaller heifer or one that isn't the right size at the right time. And now they're even doing that with their dairy cows. They're going back to pelvic measurements and which cows can handle having a bigger calf and maybe not going to that smallest.
Yeah, so there's some I think some fine compromise there, if you will, on what you want to do, and the Holstein breed itself has made a lot of change in that area. Speaking of history, Jeff Berger and Gene Freeman were involved in those calving ease evaluations on the dairy side at Iowa State. And through the last 30 years or so of selection, the dairy breed has changed a lot. We actually have less need for some of that calving ease. So the way that we think about how we select bulls has differed, and the way that we've selected some of our dairy breeds, especially the Holsteins that have used that calving ease evaluation, the calves are born in an easier way. We're thinking more about positioning of that calf and pelvic size and those aspects of calving ease. And those calves still grow and become big. So yeah, I mean, you can kind of balance that and don't have to worry so much about a small calf. You have a smaller calf, bigger calf, as long as you end up obviously selecting on those other things to get the attributes you want.
And as you're thinking about all these different crosses, different size calves and different muscling gives you more flexibility then on what you can cross with, like a Charolais Limousine versus Angus, Hereford, things to that nature.
Yeah, that's right. And especially as you get into thinking about that, then the contribution of the cow in her calving ease is so important, because you might be able to handle a little bit more highly muscled beef calf.
Yep. Well, we're going to get into more of this, and we're going to talk about some of the results that you've been seeing with the different crosses and the different breeds on dairy. But it's just a tremendous area of interest, and we're glad you're here. We're glad you're watching. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more with Dr. James Koltes.
When it comes to treating BRD, you want a product that you can count on to get the job done at an affordable price. Macrosyn by Bimeda delivers on both. A straight shooting, no BS tulathromycin that does what it's supposed to do. End of story. You don't need to take our word for it though. Go to macrosyn.com for customer testimonials and head-to-head trial results. For your cattle and your bottom line, choose Macrosyn.
It's the drive, the passion, the unbridled desire to be the world's greatest. It's the early mornings, late nights, and every hour in between spent grooming the next generation of champions. We're with you through the best times and the tough times. Seeing your horses through inevitable health scares and setbacks you never saw coming. Everything they deserve is here, delivered fast. We'll work hard for you so you can work hard for your dreams.
In the livestock industry, castration is a common practice to ensure proper herd management. All methods are painful, regardless of the age of the animal. At Solvit, we could not ignore the clear industry need for better castration solutions. So we developed LioBand, a novel lidocaine-impregnated elastrator, addressing the pain associated with band castration. It provides local anesthesia throughout the castration process. LioBand, a small device that can make a big difference.
When the ones who have your heart need your help, count on us for everything they deserve, delivered fast. We'll work hard for you so you can work hard for your dreams.
Welcome back to DocTalk. Dr. Dan Thompson here with Dr. James Koltes, and we're at Iowa State University in the Department of Animal Science, where Dr. Koltes is an assistant professor in our animal breeding and genetics section. Been doing a lot of work with some of these genetics, dairy on beef, beef on dairy. Tell us a little bit about what some of your results, what you've seen in different crosses and different breeds.
Sure. So on the breed cross side, the data that we had available to us were primarily Limousin, Limousin Angus, or what folks call Limflex, and then Simmental, and then the Simflex or Sim Angus crosses. And so primarily what we see, some of it's not so surprising. I mean, the Simmental and the Limousin definitely inject some muscling into those offspring. I do think you see a bit of some attributes there from the Angus side that are not surprising in terms of having that good meat quality, maybe a little bit higher back fat in some cases, especially on the Limflex side. And the Limousin really does inject some muscle in there, and may have some positive attributes for the ribeye area.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too, that when, we always talk about a dairy ribeye versus a beef ribeye, and that flatter ribeye versus the rounder shaped ribeye. So having some of those that are more muscle, maybe that squashes that ribeye a bit in those crosses?
Yeah, I at least I hope so. One of our challenges is we probably need more understanding of the shape of the ribeye, but I think those breeds that give you at least a little bit more ribeye area, and then with some of these breeds like Limousin that have a bit more pop of muscle, I think that does help. And you can see that folks that are working on those crosses are thinking about some of those breeds, even Charolais in some cases, to add some extra muscle to avoid that dairy type carcass that's not as valuable.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because when you see these calves and you start to think about qualifying or getting them into some of our different beef programs, that shape and validation of being consistent is going to be important.
Absolutely, and we've seen in our studies, especially some of our genetic studies looking at genomics, that there are markers that will increase ribeye area, and that's helpful, but to an extent. If it's a flat ribeye, it may not be as valuable as a curved one. So time will tell where we go with that. I hope we can be involved in maybe developing some new traits to look at that shape as well.
And that's one of the things, folks, that I have learned. I haven't been that in tune with the genetic side, but breeding and genetics is really, part of it is what's on paper and being able to figure it out. The other part is validation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And another aspect, we'll be getting some more of this data to really validate our results and see in additional breed crosses what's going on, and do we see the same kind of effects, for example, of certain genetic variants that may impact muscularity in one breed? Do they do just as well in another? And that kind of comes back to that complementarity aspect, or what we call gene combination across breeds.
Yeah, and the good news is dairy is pretty streamlined, and the genetics are very well validated, right, compared to beef.
Although one thing, since we haven't selected on the beef side, it's very uniform on the dairy side, and if you had a beef animal from purebred dairy, they're very consistent. But when we start looking at variability in some of these traits, since we're not selecting on them, sometimes there is some wiggle there we don't know about.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see what we find out over time, if there are some beef things that we kind of have ignored that maybe we could do something with in selection.
Yep. Well, folks, big numbers of these animals are going to be hitting the beef industry. They're going to be in our feedlots. The more we learn, the better. We come back, we'll be with Dr. Koltes, and we'll talk about some of the future directions and communication that's needed to raise these dairy beef crosses.
The cross of an open cow these days very expensive. It's hard at times to dedicate a half a day or a whole day to leave your practice to go palpate cows. And so Alertus test has helped speed the process up of getting preg rates back to the owners. And so free up time for diagnostics or working in your clinic. It also will help generate revenue, not being on site to do the testing.
Success in the cattle business hinges on a lot of different people playing their part, from the vet to the cowboy and the nutritionist to the feed truck driver. You rely on them to get their job done right, and so do your cattle. Your expectations for the vaccines you use should be no different. Bimeta's cattle vaccines were developed and are made and sold by men and women in the cattle business. No smoke and mirrors, just real-world protection that you can rely on. Go to bimetabiologicals.com to learn more.
When a new calf hits the ground, the clock starts ticking. A belly full of colostrum gives them their best chance, but if they don't get any, time starts running out. That's when you grab a bag of Oxford Ag Colostrum in their patented feeding system. It's simple. You fill it with warm water, shake it to mix, feed it with a tube or a nipple, and you are done. No bucket, no bottle, no mess, and right on time. Ask for it by name wherever animal health supplies are sold.
When the ones who have your heart need your help, count on us for everything they deserve, delivered fast. We'll work hard for you so you can work hard for your dreams.
Welcome back to DocTalk. Dr. Dan Thompson here with Dr. James Koltes. We're in the Department of Animal Science at Iowa State University, where Dr. Koltes is a tremendous teacher, tremendous researcher, and he is in our animal breeding and genetics section, one of our best faculty members, and just lucky to have you here and lucky to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dan.
You know, as we look to the future, I think that there's going to be more of these animals, not fewer of these animals, and it's going to come with some need of some communication.
Yeah, and kind of as we discussed briefly, you know, these dairy producers haven't been thinking about producing beef, and the way that they approach maybe some of the early life calf aspects and what bulls we select to produce the best beef animals. I think there'd be a lot of benefit from having that feedback from folks in the feedlot and talking about maybe where that extra investment may pay off.
Yeah, I think on the genetic side, and then as a veterinarian, you know, the one thing I see is that, you know, colostrum in those dairy beef crosses, don't over-vaccinate, right? There can be too much of a good thing, and really ventilation and nutrition and working through that, but communicating with the people that they're going to help with that health is another aspect that we've got to manage.
Yeah, and I mean, really thinking a lot about that beef calf the same way that we do about our dairy heifers, and taking just as good a care of them as we do with our heifer calves, and really thinking about, you know, how do we set that animal up for the best lifelong growth and health.
Yep, and you know, I think there's one thing that we could talk to the dairy industry about too is, you know, some people are trying to put in their own little feedlot at their dairy and feed the calves themselves, but you know, they could retain ownership and custom feed with feedlots and be a great consistent customer where they don't have to dive into cattle feeding, and they have cattle feeding partners that'll help them make money to finish those calves.
Right, and I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity, because it's one thing to kind of hear this is the best way to do it, then it's another thing to say, here's my incentive on the bottom line, right? So if you've got that retained ownership, you're seeing that animal through all the way, you're participating in that profitability from a better muscled, better marbled calf being sold, then I think it just kind of creates a better system.
The other thing that we've discussed too, one of the issues potential with these is that these calves are a little bit more prone to digestive disorders, which then leads to bloat or to liver abscess, and so management of that is going to be a little different than when we feed beef calves.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, interestingly, there's probably some opportunities on the genetic side to select for some improvement in some of those areas. We haven't thought about it. We don't have the tools yet. But much like we could use genetics to improve ribeye area or carcass area, things that we have today in those beef bulls, we could develop some of these kinds of things, and calf traits are starting to come along too, so we could benefit from that as well in that young animal.
Yeah, it's just tremendous when you think about the opportunities we have in front of us and what an important role genetics plays. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Dan.
Folks, if you want to know what we do on DocTalk, you can find us on the web at www.doctalktv.com. Always work with your local veterinarian. For Dr. James Koltes, I'm Dr. Dan Thompson, and we'll see you down the road.
At Merck Animal Health, we're shaping the future of animal health with pioneering science, connected technology, and insights-driven solutions to bring our customers an unparalleled portfolio of choices to improve cattle care and operational efficiency. We support you and your legacy by helping you meet the challenges of today with the innovations of tomorrow.
The cost of an open cow these days is very expensive. It's hard at times to dedicate a half a day or a whole day to leave your practice to go palpate cows. And so Alertus test has helped speed the process up of getting preg rates back to the owners. And so free up time for diagnostics or working in your clinic. It also will help generate revenue, not being on site to do the testing.